Hello everyone, this is Dr. Carlos Galera Zarco. Welcome to this session number 13 for the module Build Asset Management. In that session we are going to cover two interesting topics. The first one is about to know the assets that an organization owns, and the second one is about how to manage the in-service assets. Well, here you have an overview. The main learning objectives for this session. The first one is going to be to understand better the importance of knowing the range of assets owned by an organization. We need to understand which are the roles of these different assets, the technologies which are involved in these assets, and the critical issues affecting them. The second objective is to be aware of the different types of activities which are needed from a strategic perspective in order to keep in service the different assets in an organization. And the third one would be to understand the importance of having an integrated overview of deployed assets and a suitable plan to support and maintain them. Well, we are going to start with this initial topic, knowing your assets. First of all, I would like to give you some context for the two topics that we are covering today, because they are connected with the medium-term and long-term perspective. And basically, they are about assessing strategically the business model environment in which the asset must function. I mean, in the short term, the function of the asset would be connected with the business models, and you already know that the business models engage with the dynamic capabilities that make the organizational strategy work. So the main idea here is that we need to know pretty well our assets and monitor their condition, working processes, configurations, and changes in order to make sure that they are generating the capabilities and making the strategy work. So the first step is to have a clear understanding of the assets which are required in order to keep the business profitable, in order to make the business model work and engage with capabilities and organizational strategy. So the best strategy is going to create a register of key assets. It means the main assets that must be managed at senior level. This register of key assets is going to be a key document for capability development, for establishing the right plans, and for capital budgeting. This document, the register of key assets, should include the following information. Obviously, the asset title, a brief description of configuration, location, age, estimated remaining life, cost, which would be the replacement cost, historic record of the asset, and what we know about related issues and future plans for each key asset. We can also organize the different assets into blocks. These block diagrams will help us in understanding the role and criticality level of the different assets. In order to create a block diagram, we need to follow these rules. First one is about function for each component. Second is that each block should be physically identifiable. The blocks should be mutually independent, so it's easy to differentiate one from another. We should be able to justify the inclusion of assets into specific blocks. A good practice is that each block should focus on one main technology, like for example, asset connected with mechanical, with electrical, or with different business divisions. Later, for each block, we should provide some important information, which are the main function of the block, main inputs, outputs, structure, and operating norms. An important aspect to consider when we are trying to know the assets in an organization is the criticality. We need to understand the criticality in terms of potential losses if they fail. It means how critical the asset is for the functions and operations which are important for our business. This is very important because this will help us to prioritize the maintenance work. It's obvious that there will be some assets which are more critical than others for an organization depending on their business activities. Here you can see a criteria to identify critical assets. The first one would be the failure category. Second one would be the impact. Also, we need to consider how easy would be to repair the asset, the level of the mean downtime, and the cost of breakdown. By using these criteria, we can rank the criticality for the different assets in an organization. Other important concept in knowing our assets is bottlenecks. Basically, bottleneck is a part of a process which has limited capacity and constrains the system as a whole. Bottlenecks are not always constant. This will depend on the type of activity and the intensity of activities within an organization. It's also important that we understand the interconnections and dependencies between different activities and assets because sometimes when we make actions to remove an existing bottleneck, we may create a new one in a different part of the process. This is particularly important for industrial processes. So the main idea here is that as part of our asset knowledge, we need to be aware of the existing and potential bottlenecks and the different dependencies between the assets that an organization owns. Okay, now we are going to focus on the second topic of this session, which is management of in-service assets. The first concept that you need to understand here is the concept of deployed assets. Deployed assets are the assets which are currently in service and working for the organization. So it seems clear that there is an important need for central knowledge and strategic management of these assets. Usually, the day-to-day operation of these assets is made by operating divisions, but the extent to which asset maintenance is under the direct control of asset managers will depend on the organization and the different business activities that the organization do. Which are the main objectives of in-service support? Well, the first one is to make sure that the assets are delivering their function and that they are filling their functions correctly over their life cycle. And this is critical, this is crucial, because to achieve the business objectives for an organization, the deployed assets should provide the expected capacity, availability, and work with the quality and safety conditions required. So the ultimate objective of in-service support activities will be to enable the assets to effectively support the organizational business goals. So here we are going to describe which are the main activities required to support the deployed asset, which are the in-service support activities. The first one would be to gather the information that will support the decision making. The second one is procurement. This is about new acquisition or replacement equipment. Other activity is connected with facilities and resources. Basically, this is about planning for facilities for maintenance and logistic support over the assets lifecycle. We also need to consider the regulatory issues. It means we need to be aware of changes in regulations and response to these changes. The knowledge and support of information systems connected with the assets is also an important activity for in-service support. Technical support obviously will be required, and we should monitor the cost and frequency of this technical support that obviously will increase as the asset age increases. Configuration management, which is basically to keep records of the configuration status. We will cover this particular aspect later. Obviously, the activities connected with maintenance, both planned and reactive, outsourcing activities, basically what we were talking about last week. This would be about making the decision to manage the maintenance of an asset in-house or to outsource to a third party. The replacement analysis basically is to decide when to repair, when to replace, so we need a strategy connected with that. Disposal, we need to consider if there is a result value at any point in the life of an asset, and obviously the budgeting for all the activities that we have described above. Here you have a hierarchical tree to represent the organization for in-service support. Obviously, from the asset group managers, we will have the acquisition project managers. This is connected with new projects to acquire new capabilities. And here we are focused in service asset support managers. So these support managers will cover different areas such as planning, contracting, support facilities, procurement, inventory management, configuration management. These are the main areas that need to be covered in service asset support department. Now we are going to focus on the configuration management activity. Configuration management involves keep track of the configuration for the deployed assets. This will include controlling and managing any change. And this is very important because the lack of configuration management will lead to a lack of awareness of assets, creating a lot of problems for operation, maintenance, and logistic support. So we need to know pretty well the configuration management for our physical assets. For example, if we have different buildings, they will be maybe subject to different regulations, they will have different needs, etc. Also, the software embedded in physical assets needs to be included into the configuration management records. So it's important that you keep in mind that a configuration management plan needs to be established. This plan should include a configuration description in which we are defining the capability, the details, which is the essential support needed for each asset, which is the type of software which is connected with the physical asset, if any. And in order to manage the configuration of the different assets, it's key to keep track of the current configuration details for all our assets, or at least for the key ones. So we need to keep record of any change as they are implemented. So the technical information needs to be updated as changes happen. This is very important because if we are not keeping records about changes in the configuration, we can affect the operation of the asset and ultimately affect our business activity. Other important field connected with in-service asset management is change management. So when changes to in-service assets are required, They must be subject to a formal evaluation process. This formal process should include the details of the change that is being proposed, the reasons that justify this change, the importance and impact of the change, which are going to be the resources needed to implement the change, which will be the operational implications and the logistic support implications, what is going to be the schedule for the change, and obviously the cost. In case the change is approved, a change management plan will be required, and this plan should include different factors. The first one is the operational plan, basically how we are going to manage the operation while the change happens. We will have to consider also the modification procedure and the modification kits, tools, materials, components, etc. Also, in case that this is needed, we need to consider the disposal issues. And the last 2 points are connected with keeping updated the documentation and the configuration management. It means make sure that all the changes are registered and that the new configuration for the asset is being recorded. Well, we are arriving to the end of this session. Here you have the main conclusions. The first one is that it's very important to have a clear understanding of the assets in an organization and create a register of key assets. And also, we need to understand the criticality of our assets to determine the potential losses if they fail. In terms of in-service management, we need to make sure that our assets are delivering their expected functions to achieve the organizational business goals. And as we have been talking recently, it's key to keep track of assets configuration and to manage change effectively when these changes are affecting our deployed assets. That's all from me. Here you have the references, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in our synchronous session. Goodbye for now.